Chosen one, the rain falls the way it always does in cities that have forgotten they were once beautiful. Sideways, bitter, indifferent, a narrow alley in Istanbul, somewhere between the old bazaar and the water, where the cobblestones still remember the boots of emperors. The year is now. The stakes are ancient. Ilara Voss, 32, stands pressed against a stone wall with a satellite phone in one hand and a cracked photograph in the other. Her coat is soaked through. Her jaw is set in the particular way of someone who has stopped being afraid and started being angry instead. She is brilliant in the way that inconveniences powerful men, quietly, persistently, irrefutably. A former cryptographer for a European intelligence agency she is not allowed to name, she left the service 18 months ago under circumstances that have never been officially explained. She has been following a thread ever since. Tonight the thread led here, across the alley, leaning against a rusted iron gate with the specific casual ease of someone trained to look casual, is Cale Morrow, 35. He is reading a menu from a restaurant 3 doors down. He is not hungry. He is watching the same building Ilara is watching, and he has been watching it for 4 hours longer than she has. He works for no government currently active, though several have tried to claim him. He knows 11 languages and speaks 4 of them without an accent. The other 7 he speaks with accents he chooses deliberately, for reasons that are strategic. He is holding the menu upside down and does not realize it. They notice each other at the same moment. It is not romantic, not yet. It is the recognition of 2 wolves who have been stalking the same prey and have just stepped into each other's sightlines. There is a calculation, there is a pause, there is the question, enemy or inconvenient ally, that hangs between them like the rain. Ilara speaks first. She almost always speaks first. "You're burning your cover," she says in English, nodding at the menu. "That place closed 8 months ago. The sign's still there, but the windows are boarded on the inside if you look at the right angle." Cale looks at the menu, turns it over, looks up at her with an expression that does not admit embarrassment because it has never learned the word. "You're standing in a doorway that the building's security camera covers from the northeast corner," he says. "You've been made for 40 minutes. A beat." "Have I?" she says. "Not by me," he says. "I don't know who else is in there." This is how it begins. Not with attraction, though that is present, immediate and carefully ignored by both of them, but with information. They have been moving toward the same point for months along completely separate lines, and the universe, which has a crude and impractical sense of humor, has deposited them in the same alley in the same rain at the same hour. His name is a legend in certain rooms, hers is a ghost story in certain others. Neither of them knows this about the other yet. They move. Because whatever is happening inside that building, whatever the thread has led to, whatever the 400 encrypted files and 6 dead sources and 1 very ominous shipment manifest have been pointing toward, it is happening tonight. And 2 people who are each extraordinary alone have just, without deciding to, become something else. 6 weeks later, in a safe house outside Zurich that smells of old wood and coffee, and the particular anxiety of people who cannot go home, Ilara is spread across a table covered in documents. She has not slept properly in 3 days. This is not unusual for her. She has trained her body to operate on 4 hours and her mind to operate on spite and curiosity. Cale comes in from the cold with 2 cups of coffee and the news that their contact in Prague is dead. He tells her this the way he tells her most difficult things, directly, without cushioning, because he has learnt in 6 weeks that she finds cushioning condescending. She takes the coffee, she absorbs the news, she closes her eyes for 4 seconds and then opens them and says, "Then we don't wait for Warsaw, we move directly to the source." He sits across from her. "That's aggressive." "It's accurate," she says. "There's a difference." He considers this. He has spent 6 weeks learning the architecture of how she thinks, and it is unlike anything he has encountered. Most people, even brilliant ones, move in straight lines. Ilara moves in something more like a web. She pulls threads from 6 directions simultaneously, and somehow they all arrive at the same point. It is if he is honest with himself, and he is always painfully extraordinary. "The source," he says, "is protected by a private security apparatus that has a budget larger than the GDP of several small nations." "I know," she says. "And we have," he says, gesturing at the room, at the documents, at the 2 of them, "this. We have more than this," she says, and she slides a file across the table. Inside it is a name, 1 name. The kind of name that makes rooms go quiet. Director Solomon Vael, 70 years old, never photographed, never publicly named. The architect, according to 6 years of Ilara's work and, she has recently discovered, 4 years of Cale's parallel investigation of a system so embedded in the world's institutional infrastructure that most people living comfortably inside it have never once felt its presence. It is not a conspiracy in the cinematic sense, no secret meetings in shadow, no single dramatic villain. It is more like weather. It is the accumulated consequence of choices made by one man over 50 years, choices that have shaped markets and governments and conflicts and silences in ways that most analysts will spend their entire careers attributing to chance. Cale stares at the name. Something passes across his face that is not quite surprise and not quite recognition, and is precisely the expression of a man who has suspected something for a long time and now has to decide how he feels about being right. "How long have you known?" he asks. 14 months, she says. "You?" "Longer," he says. He pauses. "I need to tell you something." "I need you to tell me something," she agrees. What follows is 3 hours of conversation that neither of them will ever fully describe to anyone else. Not because it is secret, but because some conversations belong only to the people who had them. They lay everything on the table, every source, every dead end, every piece of evidence they have each been carrying in isolation. It is for both of them the first time in their adult professional lives that they have done this with another human being. The experience is disorienting. It is also quietly a relief so profound it feels almost physical. By the end of it, they know what they are facing. By the end of it, they know what they have. And by the end of it, they understand, without saying it, that what they have is each other, two minds that have been built by different roads for different purposes that are now improbably pointed at exactly the same thing. "We can't do this with normal methodology," Cale says. "No," Ilara agrees. "We need to be willing to go further than either of us has gone before." "Yes," a pause that has its own texture, its own weight. "Are you afraid?" he asks. Not as a challenge, as a genuine question. He has learned that genuine questions are the only kind she respects. She thinks about this with the seriousness it deserves. "Of failing," she says, "not of trying." He nods. This is exactly his answer too. He does not say this. He does not need to. The world does not know their names. This is strategic. This is also, in a way, neither of them has examined too carefully, a kind of loneliness, to be doing something that matters, something that has required everything, and to be doing it entirely outside the visibility of the people it is meant to protect. But they are learning something about each other that surprises them both. They are individually remarkable. Together they are something the world has not quite had a word for. Ilara can hold the entire architecture of a system in her mind and find the hairline fracture that will bring it down. Cale can walk into any room on Earth and make the people in it trust him before he has spoken 10 words. These are not merely complementary skills. They are, in combination, a kind of force. She sees what to do, he makes it possible to do it. And in the spaces between, in the long nights in safe houses, in the careful reconstructions of what went wrong, in the arguments that are really just two extremely stubborn people who respect each other too much to be dishonest, they are making something else, a shared understanding, a shared language, the particular and irreplaceable knowledge of another person that can only be built by surviving difficult things together. They do not talk about this. They are both too disciplined and too private, and if the truth is told, too frightened of it to look at it directly. But it is there. It is the thing that makes them extraordinary. Not their skills in isolation, the fact that they have found each other. Vienna, the Opera House, an event that has been on the calendar of every significant European power player for 6 months. Vail will be there, his first confirmed public appearance in 11 years, hidden in plain sight as a private patron of the arts, the kind of old-world camouflage that has always worked because it is so tediously respectable. Ilara is in a dress she chose because it has 4 interior pockets and a hemline that does not restrict movement. She looks extraordinary in it. She is not thinking about this. Cale, who notices more than he acknowledges, is thinking about it precisely once and then filing the thought somewhere disciplined. They are not together in the room. They are never visibly together when it matters. This is intentional. 2 independently moving pieces that can act in concert without being identified as a unit. But they are connected by an earpiece so small it is invisible, and a communication protocol they developed themselves, a kind of shorthand that compresses entire conversations into syllables and silences. He is near the entrance, she is near the stairs. Between them, circulating through the gilded room with its champagne and its old money and its conversations about nothing that mean everything, they are reading the space, Every exit, every security position, every face that is not in the guest list but is in the room anyway, which tells you everything if you know how to look. Northeast cluster, she says into the space near her collarbone. 3. Not social. Scene, he says, a breath. He's not in the main hall. He's never in the main hall, she says. He'll be in the gallery, 2nd floor. He likes to observe. A pause. How do you know that? Cale asks. Because it's what I would do, she says. He smiles. No one near him sees it. It is very small and very real, and it is the kind of smile that happens when you encounter once again the particular texture of a mind you have come to know so well it still manages to surprise you. He moves toward the stairs. What follows in the gallery is the confrontation that 6 years of Alara's work and 4 of Cale's have been pointing toward. Solomon Vale, 70 years old, standing in front of a Klimt he owns, a man who has never been confronted in his life because he has always been so far behind the curtain that the curtain itself didn't know he was there. He sees them and he knows immediately what they are. Old men who have built what Vale has built develop a particular sensitivity to threat. He looks at Alara, he looks at Cale, he looks at them together, and something passes across his face, not fear, not yet, but a recalibration. The look of a chess player who has just noticed a move he did not anticipate. You're not here to expose me, he says. His voice is very quiet and very precise. If you were going to expose me, you'd have done it already. You're here to make an offer. We're here to give you a choice, Alara says. Which is, help us dismantle the parts of the structure that are still running, Cale says, or we release what we have and you spend whatever time you have left explaining to 7 separate jurisdictions how you'd like to be remembered. Vale looks at them for a long moment. He is reading them the way he has read everyone for 50 years, looking for the crack, the leverage, the thing that can be used. He finds none. These 2 people, standing together in the gallery of the Vienna Opera House, are sealed against him in a way that individuals rarely are. They have no exposed ambition to exploit, no fear he can amplify, no rivalry to drive between them. They are, he realizes, with something that is almost admiration, completely unified. Who are you, he says, not hostile, almost curious. No one, Alara says. For now, Cale adds. It takes 8 more months. 8 months of navigating a dismantlement so complex that it requires simultaneously managing regulatory bodies in 4 countries, protecting sources who are still alive, neutralizing the people inside Vale's structure who do not share his sudden cooperative mood, and preventing 3 separate attempts by competing interests to seize what is being taken apart before it can be properly shut down. There is a night in Lisbon when it nearly collapses entirely. A source they trusted turns, files they needed are burned. Cale is in a car that goes off a road and walks out of a ravine with 3 broken ribs that he does not mention for 2 days because there is too much to do. When Alara finds out, because she always finds out, she does not yell at him. She sits down very carefully and she is quiet for a moment, and then she says, with a control that is its own kind of intensity, "Don't do that again." "Walk away from car accidents," he says. "Hide things from me," she says. He looks at her. "You would have worried." "I would have worried efficiently," she says. "There's a difference." And then, because they are who they are, and because the world is not finished requiring things of them, they go back to work. The day it is over, the day the last mechanism is shut down, the last account frozen, the last documentation delivered to the 4 institutions who will spend years processing what they have been handed, is a Tuesday in October. Unremarkable weather. A city neither of them chose particularly, simply where they happen to be. They sit on a bench near a river that catches the light in a way that makes it look ancient, and for the first time in longer than either of them can precisely calculate, there is nothing that needs to happen next. The thread is finished, the work is done. The world is slightly, imperceptibly, measurably better than it was, not in any way that will ever be announced or credited, not in any way most people will ever trace back to 2 people sitting on a bench in October, but better in the real, structural, consequential way that actually matters. Alara is watching the water. Cale is watching nothing in particular, which is what he looks like when he is thinking about something he has not yet decided to say. "What happens now?" she says. "I don't know," he says. This is the most honest thing 2 people who always have a plan can say. She nods. A long silence. The good kind, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. "I've been thinking," she says finally. "You're always thinking," he says. "I've been thinking," she says again, patient, "that the thing we built, the way we work, what we were able to do." She pauses, chooses words with her characteristic precision. I don't think that was about the case. He is very still. I think, she says, that was about us. Another silence. The river moves. Someone walks past with a dog that pays them no attention. I know, he says. She turns to look at him. He is already looking at her. This is the moment, not the Vienna gallery, not the Istanbul alley, not any of the charged and loaded moments in between. This is the actual moment. Two people who have spent a year being extraordinary together, finally stopping long enough to admit what that means. I'm not good at this, she says. Neither am I, he says. That's either very reassuring or catastrophic, she says. Probably both, he says. She almost smiles. He sees it. He has catalogued every version of almost smile she has, the way you catalogue the things that matter to you when you are too careful to call them that yet. There are still things in the world, she says. Other threads. There will always be other threads, he says. Yes, she says, so. She looks back at the water, then back at him. Elara Voss, who has walked into every difficult thing in her life with her eyes open. I think we should pull them a beat together, he says. Together, she confirms. It is not a romantic declaration. It is something more durable than a romantic declaration. It is a decision made by two people who are clear-eyed about what they are and what they can do and what the world needs and what they specifically, irreplaceably are when they are together. The most powerful couple on earth does not make speeches. They do not require ceremony. They shake no hands, sign no documents, appear in no photographs. The world will never know their names in the context of what they have done. But somewhere, in the architecture of things that are better than they were, in the funding that didn't reach the wrong hands, in the institutional rot that was quietly excised, in the quiet lives that continued because a particular plan was interrupted, they are present, invisibly. Completely. Two people who found each other in the rain in Istanbul and understood eventually that the finding was not accidental. The thread continues. They follow it together. The river carries light downstream and does not mark the occasion. The occasion does not need marking. It has already begun. The most enduring partnerships in history have never been built on sameness. They have been built on the precise and almost mathematical beauty of two different kinds of intelligence finding each other and recognizing, sometimes slowly and sometimes all at once, that what each of them has been missing is exactly what the other carries. This is the engine underneath Elara and Kale, not attraction, not circumstance, not the convenient narrative glue of two people thrown together by plot. Something older and more structural than any of that. The recognition of a mind that completes the shape of your own. Elara thinks in systems. This is not a metaphor or a simplification. It is a literal description of her cognitive architecture. Where most people see events, she sees patterns. Where most people see institutions, she sees the invisible logic holding them together, the load-bearing walls, the pressure points, the places where a single precise intervention will cause something enormous to shift. She has spent her entire career in rooms where she was the most analytically capable person present and has learned through long and sometimes bitter experience that this particular gift has a ceiling. You can see the fracture in the wall with perfect clarity and still have no way of reaching it. Intelligence without access is a map with no roads. Kale is the roads. This is what makes him genuinely rare, rarer in some ways than Elara's analytical brilliance, because what he does is harder to name and therefore harder to teach and harder to value in the institutional contexts that have always tried to claim him. He reads people the way she reads systems, intuitively, structurally, beneath the surface presentation. He walks into a room and within minutes has understood who defers to whom, who is performing confidence they don't feel, who has something to protect, who is lonely enough to be kind if you approach them correctly. He does not manipulate in the cynical sense, he connects. He makes people feel, accurately, that he sees them, and people who feel seen will open doors that remain permanently closed to everyone else. What the script understands and what makes it worth examining closely is that these two gifts are not merely useful to each other, they are in a very specific way incomplete without each other. Elara's analytical vision operating alone produces conclusions that cannot be acted on. She can identify exactly what needs to happen and find no way through the human architecture that stands between knowing and doing. Kale's relational genius, operating alone, produces access without direction. He can get into any room on Earth and stand there, charming and perceptive, with no map for what the room is actually for. Together they form something that neither word, brilliant, capable, formidable, quite covers on its own. They form a complete instrument. What the script does with particular sophistication is refuse to make this dynamic hierarchical. Neither gift is framed as primary, neither character is the lead, and neither is the support. The Vienna sequence makes this explicit. She knows where Vale will be because she thinks like him, and Cale makes it possible to reach him because he moves like water through human spaces. Remove either of them and the confrontation does not happen. The structure of the story enforces what the theme proposes, that complementary intelligence is not about one person being the brain and one being the hands. It is about two complete people discovering that they are even more complete together. This is what real power looks like when it is written honestly, not dominance, not singular genius performing above everyone else. Two different kinds of extraordinary, finally in the same room, finally pointed at the same thing. The hardest thing to do in any story is to hold back. Every instinct in conventional narrative pushes toward declaration, toward the moment where feelings are named, where the music swells, where the audience is told explicitly what to feel and when to feel it. It is the easiest trap in dramatic writing and the most common one because declaration feels like payoff. It feels like the story delivering on its promise, but what it actually does, more often than not, is rob the audience of the experience of arriving somewhere themselves. When a story tells you what to feel, you feel it less. When a story withholds just enough, when it trusts you to feel the weight of what is not being said, the emotional experience becomes something you own rather than something you were handed. This is the central argument of restraint as a dramatic device, and it is an argument the script makes not in theory but in practice, in every scene it chooses not to write. Consider the Istanbul alley. Two people meet in the rain over a shared surveillance target. In a lesser script, this would be the moment, the charged glance, the loaded pause, the music of inevitability. Instead, what happens is entirely practical. She tells him his cover is blown. He tells her she has been made. They assess each other as potential assets or threats and make a tactical decision to cooperate. The attraction is present. You can feel it in the precision of how they notice each other, in the specific quality of attention they pay. But it is never named, never lingered over, never used as the scene's emotional payload. The scene earns its tension through competence, not feeling. And paradoxically, this makes the feeling more present, not less, because it is operating underneath everything, pressurized by the refusal to release it. This is what restraint actually does technically. It creates pressure. Every scene that does not allow the emotional content to surface is another atmosphere added to a system that is building toward eventual release. The longer the containment, the more powerful the eventual moment becomes, but only if the containment is honest. Only if the emotion is genuinely present and genuinely suppressed, rather than simply absent. The script achieves this by giving both characters completely legible interior lives expressed entirely through behavior. Cale notices Alara's almost smiles and catalogues them without comment. Alara tells him not to hide things from her with a control that is its own kind of intensity. These are not neutral professional exchanges. They are people who care deeply about each other expressing that caring in the only language they have allowed themselves so far, which is the language of function and competence and presence. The Lisbon sequence is the script's most disciplined moment of restraint. Cale walks out of a ravine with 3 broken ribs and says nothing for 2 days. When Alara finds out, she does not cry, does not rage, does not deliver the speech that the audience has perhaps been waiting for. She sits down carefully and says, "Don't do that again." 7 words, the entire weight of what those 7 words contain, the fear she felt when she found out, the fear she would have felt if she had known in real time, the specific vulnerability of caring about someone in a life where caring about someone is a tactical liability, is held inside the restraint of the line rather than expressed by it. The audience feels all of it precisely because none of it is said. And then the bench in October. The whole architecture of restraint has been building to this. She says she thinks what they built was about them. He says he knows. She says she is not good at this. He says neither is he. She proposes they continue together. He agrees. This is the declaration the entire script has been withholding, and it arrives as a decision rather than a confession, which is the only kind of declaration these two people would ever make and the only kind that is emotionally true to who they are. It lands with the full accumulated weight of everything that was not said in Istanbul and Zurich and Vienna and Lisbon, every suppressed moment finding its resolution not in a speech but in 2 words. Together, she says. Together, he confirms. The most powerful line in the script contains 4 syllables and arrives after 400 days of silence on the subject. This is what restraint earns. Not a smaller emotional moment, but a larger one, deeper, realer, more completely owned by the audience because the audience has been carrying the feeling themselves for the entire duration of the story and finally, precisely has somewhere to put it. Restraint is not withholding. It is the art of making the audience hold something on the story's behalf until the story is ready to receive it back. When it works, the release is not the writer's. It belongs entirely to the person reading, watching, feeling. That transfer of ownership is the whole point. That is what makes drama live beyond the page. Power, in almost every story ever told, announces itself. It arrives with title and uniform and the deference of rooms that go quiet when it enters. It has a face the camera finds easily, a name that appears in the credits of historical consequence, a moment of public reckoning where the world acknowledges what has been done and by whom. This is the grammar of power as narrative has always understood it, visible, attributed, celebrated or condemned, but always fundamentally seen. The script dismantles this grammar quietly and completely. It proposes something more uncomfortable and more true, which is that the most consequential force operating in the world at any given moment is almost certainly the one you cannot name, the one that leaves no signature, the one that does not need the acknowledgement because the acknowledgement was never the point. Elara and Kale are never photographed. They appear in no official record of what they accomplish. The institutions that receive the documentation they have spent years assembling will process it, act on it, build careers and reputations on the back of it, and will never once be in a position to correctly identify its origin. This is not presented as tragedy. It is not framed as injustice or sacrifice in the melodramatic sense. It is simply the condition of the work they do, accepted with the same clear-eyed practicality they bring to everything else. They did not choose invisibility as a cost. They chose it as a methodology. And the script understands that this distinction is everything, because people who are invisible by necessity are victims of circumstance, but people who are invisible by design are operating at a level of strategic clarity that most visible power cannot touch. Think about what visibility actually costs. Every public figure, every named authority, every person whose power is legible and attributed is simultaneously a target, a symbol, a negotiating chip, and a constraint. Their decisions are made inside the awareness of how those decisions will be perceived, recorded, challenged. They carry the weight of their own visibility in every room they enter. The things they cannot do, the moves they cannot make, the truths they cannot speak without triggering the machinery of consequence. These are the invisible walls that visible power builds around itself simply by being seen. Solomon Vale understood this for 50 years, which is why he built an empire from behind a curtain. But even Vale was ultimately locatable, ultimately nameable, ultimately findable by two people who were looking carefully enough. His invisibility was protective, but it was also in the end a kind of hiding. He needed the curtain because the thing behind it could not survive exposure. Elara and Kale do not hide. This is the crucial distinction the script makes, and it is easy to miss because the surface behavior looks similar. They operate without public identity, they leave no traceable record, they exist in the spaces between institutional visibility. But they are not protecting something that fears the light. They are simply uninterested in the light because the light is not what they are working toward. Their goal is outcome, not credit. Their measure of success is structural change in the real world, not the acknowledgement of that change. This is a level of ego dissolution that is genuinely rare and genuinely difficult, and the script presents it not as virtue or nobility, but simply as the logical endpoint of caring more about the thing than about being known for the thing. There is a philosophical tradition that understands this. The idea that the greatest action leaves no trace of the actor, that genuine mastery is indistinguishable from the natural order of things, that real influence operates so deeply in the structure of events that it cannot be separated from those events and examined independently. This is not mysticism. It is a description of how the deepest change actually happens in human systems, not through the dramatic and visible interventions that history records, but through the patient, invisible restructuring of conditions that make certain outcomes inevitable and certain others impossible. Elara has been doing this analytically for years. Kale has been doing it interpersonally. Together they do it at a scale that neither could reach alone, and they do it without leaving the kind of footprint that would allow anyone to understand what happened or reverse it. The bench scene in October is the script's final and most elegant statement on this theme. The work is done. The world is different in ways that matter. And they are sitting on a bench by a river that catches the light in the way old things do, completely unmarked by the significance of what surrounds them. No ceremony, no record, no moment of public reckoning where consequence is attributed and credit assigned. The river moves. Someone walks past with a dog. The world continues in the slightly better shape they have given it, entirely unaware that it has been given anything at all. This is the script's definition of the most powerful couple on earth, and it is a definition worth sitting with because it inverts everything conventional power fantasy offers. It says that power at its highest expression is not the ability to make the world know your name. It is the ability to change the world so completely and so cleanly that the world cannot find the seam where you touched it. It says that the ego's need for acknowledgement is not a feature of power, but a limitation of it, a ceiling that the truly extraordinary learn to operate beneath. It says that the couple who saves something real and receives nothing for it is not diminished by that invisibility, but defined by it, elevated by it, made more rather than less by the choice to let the work be the whole point. Most stories end with the world finally seeing the hero. This one ends with the world still not seeing them, and frames that not as the cost of heroism but as its fullest expression. The most powerful couple on earth sits on a bench in October and watches a river and decides to continue. Nobody knows. That is precisely the point. That is exactly the power.